Welcome to Harnessing the Power of Generative AI and Financial Services Compliance. It's my great pleasure to introduce to you Todd Cooper, CEO of New Arca Labs. Todd Cooper has over 25 years of experience in banking compliance, focusing on developing platforms and solutions that tackle regulatory and risk challenges. As New Arca's CEO and co-founder, he drives innovation and value creation for clients of all sizes. He previously held leadership roles at Wolters Kluwer and PCI Corporation. Todd is based in Greater Boston. With that, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Todd. Thank you, Todd.
Thank you, Ryan. Great to be here today, and thanks everyone for attending. We're going to talk through the power of generative AI. We'll talk about some of the challenges that financial service firms, banks in particular, are facing in taking advantage of this tremendous technology. And then also about how compliance is a great place to start with generative AI and being able to use the tool to have a tremendous impact on the bank's competitiveness as well as the bank's ability to efficiently execute compliance programs, and to do all of that while staying in line with what the regulatory guidelines are on using AI and large language models and within the bank's policies. So you all know what large language models are. Probably a lot of you have used them. You've made use of ChatGPT or other similar types of tools where you've been able to see how fun and useful they are and how they can synthesize large amounts of information in a very dynamic way to give you interesting results. The real opportunity to change the world exists with this technology. Not every technology that comes around is going to have that kind of impact. This technology does. And while large language models and AI is not coming for your job anytime soon or coming for your bank anytime soon, the banks that make use of this technology are definitely gaining an advantage, and the individuals who know how to use it to accomplish their jobs are gaining an advantage as well. So it really behooves everyone who's in this industry, particularly in compliance, to understand what this technology can do for them, do for their bank, and help them progress not only their own career, but their bank's competitiveness in the market. So we're excited to be here today to talk about how you can do that and stay in line with the regulatory obligations and guidance that's out there, and to do so now, as opposed to waiting for some future state. So just to touch a little bit at first on the first point, I think I covered that. In terms of what financial institutions are seeing today, there's a lot of excitement and enthusiasm around the technology, but not a lot of knowledge in terms of how to practically make it work. And I don't know, Ryan, would you comment a bit on what the ABA's heard from the market?
Yeah, Todd, happy to. So for everyone's awareness, ABA has a cross-functional AI working group comprised of banks of all sizes. And one of the things that we do is ensure that we have representation from all roles and responsibilities within the bank. And that really helps us get a complete understanding of how the enterprise is thinking and deploying AI applications. And as you noted, Todd, one of the things that we're hearing is that many institutions, and this goes for banks of all sizes, are thinking about AI in a number of different, is really a spectrum versus, just a one term fits all. So they really categorize things in traditional forms of AI. So you can think of that a lot of times as like machine learning and variants thereof. That's more static and predictable. And then the generative AI, which nowadays when people talk about AI, that's really what they mean. This is the one that can really create something new, text, images, or sounds, videos, that really has democratized access to AI. It's much more accessible where you can go in and even a layperson like me, who's not a technologist, can really start exploring with it. So those are the two different buckets they tend to put things in. And what we've been hearing is that by and large, by a fairly wide margin, traditional AI still predominates. Generative AI is not something that they've really deployed at scale. And the reason for that is there's a number of reasons behind that decision making, but primarily it comes down to risk management. I think that you're going to be talking a little bit about that. But it's an area that they're very excited about, and thinking about experimenting and doing kind of pilot programs that are very controlled for risk. And I think that's one of the things I'm excited to hear you discuss is some of the ways they can do that in a way that mitigates a lot of those concerns. And we're going to talk a little bit later about the regulatory environment. But right now, I think it's fair to say that it's still early days. People are exploring what they can do. they're standing up and maturing their risk management programs. And one of the things that's really important to emphasize is that it's not too late to get started. We're seeing a lot of people that are just now thinking about how they can actually formalize things that are in place. But it all starts with really just building up that culture of risk management at their institutions. And ABA can help, and I know that New Arca can as well. So we're hearing a lot, but I think it's very much still early days. So happy to expand on that if I can, but otherwise I'll turn it back to you.
Thanks, Ryan. Yeah, and to Ryan's point, the opportunity exists now to use large language models and to do so in a very smart way. And we believe really compliance is a great place to start. So within the compliance function, there's a lot of reasons that aligns best with the regulatory and risk assessed approaches that banks are taking. And compliance provides a pathway to understand the technology, to make use of the technology, and to be ready to use it throughout the rest of the organization for its maximum impact. And there's a lot of organizations that have already, big banks in particular, that have already bitten into AI and large language models. And the kind of resources that a tier one global kind of organization has can't really be compared to a community bank or a regional bank or even a lot of the national banks. And so just as a quick smattering of some of the the organizations that have the money, the manpower, the technology expertise, and the time and the energy to put AI and large language model tools into play. And they're doing so very in an impactful way. What's great about this technology, though, it can be very democratizing in terms of allowing community banks and regional organizations to gain the same kind of lift, the same kind of benefits that these big organizations have inherently through their size and capability, and to do so in a very cost-effective way. In terms of the regulatory, yep, go ahead.
If I can just interject there, and I noticed that you put the big banks, but I just really want to underscore what you noted about community banks as well. A lot of this goes down to culture, and on that AI working group, we do have a lot of community banks, and it really impresses me how mature many of them are thinking about this, and how they can, with the support of leadership, begin to build and mature that framework. So by no means should community banks feel that this is something beyond their reach. Very many of them are experimenting and are very sophisticated in the way they're doing it, and that's been really encouraging for me to see.
Yeah, agreed completely. Thanks, Ryan. So talking a little bit about the obligations banks have. So there's been a lot of guidance that's been put out there by the regulators around what they need to do when they're working with an AI or a large language model system. We've categorized these into 7 main buckets. The first is you have to be able to explain what you're doing and be transparent about the applicability of how it's being applied, how it's being used. You have to have a robust risk management program around it, as Ryan mentioned a little bit earlier. If it's model risk that you're using, if you're using it to do any kind of modeling, you have to really understand that it's not drifting in any way, shape, or form, and that you're ensuring that it's accurate and that it's meaningful and it's impactful. Data quality, garbage in, garbage out, is not somehow magically fixed by having an AI or large language model. That's just the case with all data and all kinds of usage. And you have to make sure you're not violating any privacy regs or any kind of privacy covenants you might have with your clients. And then, of course, regulatory compliance. You have to make sure that any kind of UDAP or TILA or Fair Credit Act or anything else that's out there regarding privacy regulations are still being adhered to and followed as you're using these technologies. Any kind of third-party risk management. So if you're working with a third party and you're delegating any part or you're incorporating them in any part of the services that are delivered to your clients or to their clients, make sure that that continuity continues to be in play. And then cybersecurity standards. And obviously cybersecurity is an area that all banks are struggling with as this unprecedented attack continues. And multiple vectors constantly coming in, and make sure that you're keeping your attack surface very small. So those are the 7 fundamental areas that the regulators have indicated that banks need to be aware of as they're taking and following as they're taking these AI tools into their main operations. Ryan, do you want to expand on that a bit or to talk about what you're hearing from the regulators?
Yeah, thanks, Todd. So this is a really expansive and comprehensive list. We've heard many pronouncements from several of the regulators, particularly those in financial services, that just really emphasize that AI is not some kind of magic term that you're not going to suddenly have to comply with existing obligations that are technology neutral. And we've heard a number of things on that front. So we're recording this as of January 15th. So that means a new administration is on its way to Washington in the very near future. One of the results of that is many people are thinking, well, what does this mean for the regulatory agencies and how they're going to be approaching it? Well, we do expect to see some more pronouncements in that space. I don't think we can forecast necessarily, but I think it's really important to continue to ensure that you're identifying, assessing, and mitigating the risk. Some of those that are delineated here in a comprehensive and holistic manner. And we're going to be working with the regulators to get more clarity around what that means and how banks can document that accordingly, and very much expect this to be very active in the regulatory side, but also legislative. Several in Congress have identified AI as an area that they're going to be focusing on, particularly that with financial services. The good news is their financial services industry has a head start over every other industry because you have that model risk management guidance and that supervision. So this is something that you're well used to doing, and you're already far ahead of the pack as far as that goes. So we do expect that to continue to be an area of focus. And then, of course, I would be remiss if I didn't talk about the examination side. So it's one thing to have the official policy set by the agencies, but then how the field examiners are actually applying that in the course of their supervisory activities is quite another. So I think it's really important to be mindful and to know how your examiners are looking at this. They're going to have a lot of questions. You're definitely going to want to be able to explain things and be open with them about how you're thinking about AI. Many of you are relying on your third party, and Todd indicates here the third party risk management, that is a huge area of focus and risk with this, because you're oftentimes taking those of vendors and deploying them. So it's really important that you be able to answer the questions that your examiners have. But hopefully that's going to be done in a way that doesn't stifle responsible innovation. And I know that's something that many are concerned about. When you're thinking about the technical aspects of this, really you got to focus on things like the inputs, the outputs, and the outcomes. Very few people actually understand the technology around large language models, but people can understand the inputs, outputs, and outcomes. And that's one thing to really, at your bank, to document and be open and transparent with your regulators about. So that's what we're hearing, Todd. It's very much a period of transition right now, but that's pretty much guidance that is going to be good for banks to follow, regardless of the administration in Washington.
Great, thanks, Ryan. Just to continue the conversation, and the main thrust of the conversation from here is how you can use AI properly to create a tremendous advantage over the competition, and to make your jobs more impactful and have a 10 times impact, sort of super your compliance teams. One of the really interesting things that AI can do, and large language models in particular, is it can make groups of individuals more impactful in their environment. This is a study that was done with the Harvard Business School and the BCG Consultancy Group. They took a group of junior consultants from BCG and gave them some large language model tools in order to help them become more efficient and more effective at their jobs. They saw 12.5% increase on the speed of tasks being completed, but more importantly, a 40% increase in the quality of the results, which is a tremendous impact on a group of relatively junior consultants that would normally be looked after in a very discreet and very overhanded kind of way. So this allows them to be more impactful and almost to the same level of impactfulness as a more senior consultant. So why compliance? Why is compliance a great place to start? We went through the reasons and what you have to do in order to stay in line with the regulatory guidance. And now compliance is perfect because it allows you to both make use of the technology as well as to stay on side with the guidance that's out there. First of all, there's no impact with customer data. You're not implementing a tool that's going to be integrated in and seeing any of the specific customer information that's out there. So there's no customer decision making, there's no pricing, there's no external communications that are happening. You're not placing a system between yourself and the customer that's automated or enabled by large language model in any way, shape, or form. You're using it to enhance your ability to get your job done and not putting the client or the customer at risk. Zero system integration, so you don't have to integrate this within multiple systems in order to make it productive. This both reduces the expense of implementation, but even more importantly, reduces the risk associated with implementing a technology. So you don't have to worry about what's going to happen to your LOS or what's going to happen to your deposit system or what's going to happen to any of the reporting systems you're using. And instead, you can just focus on benefiting from the tool itself. So really, it helps to strengthen the protections of the customer, so it has an additional impact, a positive impact on outcomes for customers, in that by streamlining the compliance process and making compliance itself more impactful, it actually increases the effectiveness of the overall programs, and that helps to protect the customers that the compliance regulations are designed to protect. It helps on staffing shortages. So compliance has chronically understaffed. I don't think I've ever talked to a chief compliance officer who said they have exactly how many or too many employees working for them. They always need more resources to get the job done. By its nature, that's what compliance requires. And this really helps to address those kind of shortages or the ability to do more with less. And which is always a challenge and something that executives look for compliance to be able to accomplish. Enhances response speed. So all the operational units that rely on compliance to give them answers or to provide input on different processes, they can get those answers more quickly, or even self-serving those answers simply by asking them into a centralized large language model system that understands the compliance obligation. This better aligns the interests of the operational teams with compliance and allows them to pursue their imperatives independent of compliance, which that increased speed of business is a little bit difficult to measure, but it dramatically reduces frictions between those teams and enables those groups to pursue their imperatives without having to worry about a third party checking on them. Language-based task optimization. The last point I'll make here is that these large language models are brilliant at text-based and language-based technology shifts. And if you think about what compliance is, it's really a lot of moving a law into a regulation and a regulation into a policy and a policy into procedure, and then all of that into risk and controls and training material, et cetera, et cetera. And those are essentially translations of language from one form of information to another. And large language models are very good at that kind of transformation. So it's a very strong alignment between the capabilities of the technology and the problem set that it's looking to address. So all of these reasons make compliance a very good fit for large language models, and that's really where we've been placing our emphasis in helping to make that happen. One of the, what we're able to do when you put a system like this in place for compliance at the compliance governance level, our system called New Comply gives you immediate trusted answers, and trusted is a really seemingly small step away from informative answers, but it's a very big, impactful step in terms of being able to use a system in a meaningful way. So be able to go from asking a question and getting an answer that you're 100% confident in is a tremendous step in the right direction. We can do very, very fast interjurisdictional analysis. So if you're operating in multiple states or even across multiple countries, you can see specifically what the changes are that you need to put in place for your operations in each one of those areas. Automated policy assessments, take a policy document, you can push it through a system in about 30 seconds, get an answer for how well it lines up with the regulations, where the problems are, as well as completely revamp the document itself so that it's now in line. So rewrite the document so it's in line with the regulatory obligation and it's in line with all of the compliance functions that it should be put in place for. Marketing communication review, if you have loan product advertisements that are out there, any kind of finance product, investment product advertisements, whatever they might be, you have to make sure that you're not going to be violating TILA, you're not going to be violating any one of a number of other regulations or even your own internal guidance, or if you're working from a third-party system, maybe it's the guidance and the policies that are coming from Visa or MasterCard. instantly assess any kind of marketing program that's heading out of your organization and make sure that it's in line with what those obligations are, flag them, tag them specifically back to the regulation itself that's causing the issue or the policy that's causing an issue, and then provide revised text that's in line with what the obligation is. Do all of that instantaneously. Tremendous value, and helps marketing pursue their imperative without having to have compliance check them at the last minute of the cycle. Reg change assessments. So what does it mean when a new regulation comes into play? So if there's a new regulation coming in or proposed change or some kind of far afield, potentially in the future change, what would it mean to your operations? So once you have that construct of who the organization, who the bank is, that change can also take the form of, well, what happens if we add a new product? What happens if we add a new line of business? What happens if we enter into this new city, this new state, this new county? How does that change our regulatory standing, our regulatory framework? What policies need to be adjusted? What procedures need to be changed? What does it mean if we pass a threshold from 90 billion to 100 billion in assets? What needs to change about everything that we're doing? What needs to change in our training documents? And system does that very well. So it looks at all the training documents you have and all the policies you have and all of the rules and regs you have, all the rules and risks you have, et cetera, and based on the change that either is coming from the outside or a change you're internally driving, can assess exactly what needs to shift in your organization, what needs to shift in your compliance stance, your compliance function, and can automatically regenerate those pieces of information for you. Policy procedure generation, talked a little bit about that. And last thing I'll mention is 100% document testing. Almost every organization is doing sampling around compliance functions and looking at what those, sampling on various different, loan docs or insurance policies, whatever they might be, and to have a system that can instantly assess the full body of a closing package and make sure that all of it's 100% in compliance is a big deal for organizations, and we're excited to be working with them on that front. And just a quick note on that, that shift from being useful and engaging to becoming trusted, that's where New Arca Labs and where New Comply, our solution, is really focused. Being able to take the advantage of the technology, take advantage of our deep expertise on compliance and regulatory guidance and regulatory governance, and pull it together with the large language model technology and create something that's fundamentally trustworthy. So if you're getting an answer, you can trust. We also recognize that you need to be able to verify that yourself. So we also always include references back and links directly back to the regulation, whether it's the Federal Registry or the state rules and laws that specifically is guiding the answer that we've given. So where is this all heading? So right now, these tools are assistants to you as compliance professionals. Eventually, they're heading to the point where they'll be agents. So they can be more generally directed. And so as an example, if we're somewhere down the road, and not very far down the road, maybe six months down the road, if there's a regulatory change that's coming into play, the system will immediately understand what that reg change is and then rewrite the specific set of documents that you need rewritten. So you might wake up in the morning, come into the office, pour yourself a cup of coffee, and the revised policy procedure documents will be ready for your review to sign off on. And that kind of compliance agent is where this is heading, and it helps to make your job a lot easier. And it's as if you have a personal assistant who's tracking these things for you. So that's an overview of where compliance can leverage this large language model technology to thoughtfully deploy them into the financial service world, and just make sure that there's an ability to impact that change without having to violate any regulatory obligations that these banks have, and to do so in a very smart, impactful way. And we believe that compliance is the best place to start the exploration of large language model impact within banks because of the reasons we just went through. Is there anything, Ryan, you would add?
No, so Todd, being someone before I joined ABA, I was in compliance at a financial institution. Definitely recognize how the types of tools that you offer would be very valuable. And as you noted, one of the things our bank members share with us is, bridge too far right now to engage with customers on this, but making generative AI tools available to trusted partners within the bank, and compliance being at the top of the list because of the way that they approach things and are very thoughtful in their second line functions. I think it makes a lot of sense for banks that are wanting to see how they can start leveraging the efficiencies and benefits of generative AI to choose this type of function, as a way of helping them, experiment in a responsible way that is going to stay in the good graces of their regulators. Again, it's important to be very thoughtful and calculate how you're doing this, but I think that this sort of use case is certainly very much within the risk appetite, I think, of many of our member banks, and I think it's really exciting, the possibilities that are laid out here.
Great, thank you. And we're excited to bring our many years of expertise to bear on this problem. So we have just a quick view on some of the folks involved with Nuarka. Rafi Festekian, many of you will have known him from establishment of PCI and his many years working also at Wolters Kluwer. I've been involved in the compliance space for 25 plus years. And then we've built out, in addition to all the great members of Nuarka who have this kind of experience, we also have an advisory board that includes folks like James Thomas, who was a partner at Arnold & Porter, focused on regulatory issues and settlements, and Tim Berniston, who a lot of you will know, who has 45 plus years of experience with compliance in both in the federal government as well as an advisor to many banks. So we're very excited to be here today to be sharing our view on what's possible with using large language models and what can happen for compliance functions. We do think compliance is a great place to start, and we hope that we get a chance to talk to you about it in more depth. Please don't hesitate to reach out, and we'd love to talk to you more about it. Thank you.